Hey, baby, it is a season 2, episode 26 of Heavy Theology.
It's at the end of the season, aren't we?
Yes, we are. We have 2 more to go, and this is just a 2-part episode, so it should be easy peasy. I have just 1 page of notes to keep me on track today.
I'm going to miss the Bree search.
Well, I know. It'll be back next season, though. Yes, it will. Yes, it will. Today we're talking about our creepiest encounters. This is part 1. Last week we talked about collective consciousness, and if you missed that episode or any of our past episodes, I invite you to check it out. If you like what you see or hear there, please take a moment to like and subscribe so you don't miss out on future episodes of Heavy Theology.
Last week we were on the road with Boomer.
Yes, we were. Yes, we were. It was a good episode. We enjoyed filming in the car, but it's a little bit harder for editing purposes, so we decided to not film in the car anymore and just make things a little bit easier on our editor.
Yeah, because we like him.
We like him a little bit. All right, our creepiest encounters. I thought we would do this as kind of like a question and answer kind of thing.
Okay.
Yeah, does that work for you?
Absolutely.
All right.
As if I'd argue with the boss.
As if he has a choice. All right. Well, as you know, I was raised Pentecostal and you were raised Catholic.
Yep.
So my first question is, how was the demonic and paranormal viewed from your family and your church background when you were growing up?
That's a really good question. The demonic obviously had a role in life, and the devil was there, of course, to tempt you and to lead you away from God. But the actual concept of us being able to battle or spiritual warfare, it didn't exist, at least in my upbringing.
Yeah.
Whereas I understand the Pentecostal, rebuke him in the name of Jesus, cast them off, and which is all valuable, excellent stuff. I mean, I'm not dismissing it at all, but there just wasn't that element of the ability to, or the authority to, rebuke it and battle with it and deal with it.
Yeah.
You deal with it by just praying the Lord's Prayer, or playing the Hail Mary, or doing an act of contrition, or doing your duty of the 7 sacramental system.
Sure. Well, as he mentioned, in my Pentecostal background, it very much was like our lives today. It was an ever-present kind of frustration. It was an ever-present kind of thing that you had to tackle and deal with. And it was just kind of always there. Yeah.
And I would submit that is probably the more realistic view.
Sure. Sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. All right.
Or
Well,
worldview perspective, yeah.
Sure. Well, what was your very first encounter that you could say beyond a shadow of a doubt was demonic?
So I remember when I was very young, and so I know I don't remember this correctly, but this is how I remember it. We were living in Centerville, Iowa, southern Iowa. We lived there until I was 5. And my brother was going to preschool at a Roman Catholic school. And it seemed to me, the way I remember it, my mom took him to preschool and left me eating breakfast sitting at the counter. Now, I know my mom did not leave me home alone, but somehow that's how I remember it. But I know she didn't. So I don't know who else was there. But she was taking Kurt to school, and I was looking down the hallway from the breakfast bar, which was like an elevated stool and a bar where I was eating cereal for breakfast, and I could see the door to my bedroom. And the door was kind of wood grained, the hollow panel doors. And the shapes on the door were creating monsters like images. And for some reason, I just knew there was something in there that hated me and despised me and was growling at me. And I remember crying profusely.
Was it the babysitter your mom left?
It was. No, I don't think so.
Oh, okay. Well,
I was pretty adorable. I was a blonde.
Oh, there you go.
I actually had hair and stuff.
Hey, yeah.
And so that was, I wouldn't have recognized it as demonic at the time, but it was very, very creepy, and obviously it sticks out in my mind as terrifying me.
Sure.
And making me feel powerless and freeze. I was afraid to move.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that is scary. And you were 5?
I was probably 3 or 4.
Oh, 3 or 4. Yeah.
Yeah, because Kurt would have been 5 going to school.
Oh, I gotcha.
Preschool, yeah.
Yeah. No, it makes sense. Yeah. Wow. Yeah. Well, my very first encounter, as I mentioned, these things were pretty much prevalent in our lives. My dad always said if anything good happened, it came from God, and if anything bad happened, it did not come from God. It only came from the enemy. And so I never will forget, I was 15 years old. I was at home by myself on a Saturday night. And if you know anything about Southern culture, oftentimes Southern churches will have revival. And revival is where they have church services just every night of the week for, a week and sometimes longer.
As it should be.
As it should be. Well, so they were in the middle of revival. It was the last night of revival. It was a Saturday night. And, I'm at home by myself, and our church was 2 doors down from the house. I could look out the side door of our house, and I could see the church really well. And so it's starting to get kind of late. No, it's Pentecostal. It's nothing for these services to run 3 or 4 hours. Not a huge deal. But it was starting to get kind of late. And I was watching Saturday Night Live, and services started at 7 o'clock. Saturday Night Live came on at 11:30 Eastern Time. So it was really starting to get a little bit late. And I remember thinking, man, this service is really taking a long time. And I go to the side door and I look out, and I see the church members walking around the church, just, kind of marching around the church. And I was raised Pentecostal, so I knew not to open the door and not to go marching out there to see what they were doing.
My guess is they weren't getting their steps in for the day.
I'm going to guess they probably were not. Yeah, I knew enough to not go see what was going on. So along about the time of Weekend Update with Norm MacDonald, which would have been about midnight or so, my stepmom comes in and she says, whatever you do, do not leave the house and do not open the door for anybody. And I said, well, what's going on? And she said, well, I can't tell you. And I was like, well, you got to tell me now.
You got to tell me. Holy cow.
You got to tell me now. And she said, a man has come to church and he is possessed. And your dad and your Uncle Jimmy, my Uncle Jimmy was the pastor of the church, they're inside the church dealing with him. So what had happened was a man was possessed, and my dad and my Uncle Jimmy were trying to exorcise him, and the people were walking around the church praying, on his behalf.
And that's not uncommon for Satanists or those who have a fascination with demons. And if you go to Reddit, and Facebook, there are websites, there are sites dedicated specifically to understanding how to welcome demons into your life. And so what is traditionally the behavior is they go to these revivals in hopes that the revival will drive the spirit off of the Christian, and they'll be there then, of course, to catch it.
Sure.
But in the meantime, they end up catching the word.
Right.
Which then becomes offensive to that which is possessing them.
I gotcha. Well, they didn't want me to leave the house because, they had thought, if I wasn't walking in my faith as I should, that would make me vulnerable for the spirit that would be leaving that gentleman to attach itself to me. And so that's why it was important. But to me, I was thinking, do I really, have to be outside if it were going to, it could come through but anyway.
Well, and two, the people that are demonically possessed, truly possessed, can exhibit superhuman behavior and superhuman acts of violence. So even keeping you in the house, of course, was a physical protection as well, I'm sure.
Yeah. So that was that was my first kind of creepy encounter that I can remember. Yeah. All right. Well, so tell me some more. Let's just kind of go back and forth talking about our creepy encounters. We get asked quite often, what have you seen or what have you heard? And even when people don't ask, you can tell that it's just kind of there under the surface and they're wanting to know. So, yeah.
So I've had so many, growing up. And of course, now looking back, it was obviously a preparation for, or some way maybe trying to discourage me from, or trying to convince me that I was powerless over. So when I get to this point, I didn't fulfill the call or I didn't answer the call.
And I should mention that all of our stories in today's episode are going to be before we met each other, because we have a whole episode that's devoted from the time we've gotten together forward, because there's so much that's happened since we've gotten together and we've started our ministry.
So in 1987, we moved to Marshalltown, Iowa, and we bought basically a 5-story house. The 5th story was really the full-size attic. But the house was the original farmhouse for the area, and it was built in 1920. Now, of course, now it's in the center of town. Right across the street is a Jimmy John's, and there's houses all over the place. But it was the antique house. It was the old house in the area. And I remember waking up in my bedroom, and I could see from my bed the top of the stairs. And I heard noises out there like somebody was out there. Of course, the floor was creaky. It was built in the 1920s, and this was the 1980s, right? And there was a man standing at the top of the stairs, and he had a bushy blonde hair, a bushy blonde beard, a red and black checkered flannel shirt, jeans and black boots, and a black belt. And he was like waving his fists above his head. It was like yelling, but I couldn't hear him yell. And as I noticed him, and he noticed me noticing him, I saw him turn and run down the stairs. And I could hear the stairs creak. I could hear him run downstairs. Of course, there was no one there, you know. And in that bedroom, I had several other traumatic experiences that I don't talk about. They're just, I'd rather not remember them, I'd rather not encounter them. But it was a house that really was filled with some type of portal or some type of negative influence, that's for sure. It was definitely a stronghold, a demonic hotspot.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. You know, with my dad and my Uncle Jimmy, after the incident with that gentleman, he and my Uncle Jimmy were actually called to travel and to bless homes and to perform, I don't want to say exorcisms, because, you know, these were not like huge month-long encounters. I mean, these would be, you know, a couple-day encounters or whatever.
So I guess the terminology that I like to use is I like to distinguish between exorcism and deliverance.
Okay.
And everybody likes to use those terms differently. Okay. But for me, an exorcism is somebody who is completely possessed. The demon, there are times when they do not have consciousness of their body. There are times when they go unconscious and things they perform and happen, and it's the demon doing it. And those are month-long lists of prayers. A deliverance is someone who's oppressed, has a heavy presence of a demonic upon them, but is more of a short prayer term, a spiritual, which that person can then turn and reject and the demon and realize their authority and power over it. So I think what you're describing is what I would define as deliverance over an actual rite of exorcism. Would that sound about right?
Yeah, I think that would absolutely be right. And so because they were called to travel, and they would go to, you know, these different places, and they would perform these deliverances or whatever you want to call them. Our house really became kind of a hotbed for activity.
Sure.
And such to the point that I remember my dad would get up in the middle of the night and he would anoint the walls and the door frames because, you know, there would be these just noises in the walls. And, you know, it wasn't like, you know, a mouse or anything like that. I mean, it was, you could tell it was just like a popping or a, you know, you could tell that there was something a whole lot more there than a little mouse or anything like that. But he would get up and he would anoint the walls and the door frames. But one particular incident that I remember, or a set of incidents that I remembered, revolved around these glass wall sconces that my stepmom had hanging on the wall. They were from Home Interiors.
Home Interiors.
Yeah.
I remember.
So these glass wall sconces, they hang on the wall. And I remember my brother and his girlfriend were sitting on a love seat that were beneath these sconces. One day it was in between church services, because, you know, you had church service in the morning. They ran long. Sometimes they were till 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and then, you know, by the time you had lunch, you could go home and rest a little bit, and you had to be back at church at 6 o'clock. So you didn't have a whole lot of downtime, but this was during that little tiny space of downtime on Sunday afternoon. And we were watching TV, and I remember the sconces just all of a sudden in tandem, they just fell. You know, they weren't connected to each other. There shouldn't have been any reason for them to fall, but they just fell. And they missed my brother and his girlfriend, but it was just such an odd occurrence that they would fall at the same time. And I remember picking them up and putting them back in there, and they had these little rubber kind of gaskets that, you know, that would hold them. Would hold them really tight in there, and making sure that they were in there. They were seated in there correctly. They were seated in there good and tight. They weren't going to move. Well, anyway, Not too long after that, I was home by myself, and I was in my bedroom, and I don't remember what I was doing. I don't know if I was studying. I don't know what I was, I don't know if I was cleaning. I don't know what I was doing, but I was not listening to music, and that's odd for me not to have something listening to it, but I was not listening to music that day. But I remember hearing a very distinct tink, tink sound, and I knew with everything in me, it was those wall sconces. Now, my dad had this really thick, lush Berber carpet in the living room. So, for one, if they fell, they shouldn't have been making a tink, tink sound, but they did. And I expected to go into the living room and to see these sconces on the floor. Now, my dad had this huge, it was a great room. They considered it a great room. It was just a large, large living room, tons of space. And I go in, and sure enough, they're not on the wall. They're gone. But they're not in the floor underneath, where they should have fallen. They're not on either side of the love seat. Instead, they're on the other side of the room. One of them is on a couch on the other side of the room, and the other is underneath a coffee table on the other side of the room. How in the world they got there, I have no idea. I mean, this is a good space. This wasn't, just a few feet. This is a good space that they went to, and they would have had to have gone together. Again, I was the only one home. Nobody was there, but I didn't love those wall sconces.
Well, and as we have talked about in past episodes, when demons leave someplace, they usually don't like to leave their space. We had this conversation on one of our drives this last couple of weeks, that the demons, they didn't want to leave Gerasene. They didn't want to leave the territory. So they asked to be put into the pigs so they didn't have to leave the territory.
Right.
In the Old Testament, sacrifices were bound hand and foot, and it was kind of a dilemma, a object lesson, a visual of binding sin, making it incapable. And then we know in Enoch that Raphael came and bound Azazel hand and foot and threw him into the abyss. And so this is what we need to do when you're casting out demons. You need to ask that the Lord Jesus come and send his angels to bind them hand and foot and take him to the dry, arid places.
Right.
Take him to the place beyond Hebron where the portal is that takes them down to the place of the dead, so that they wander the dry, arid places. Otherwise, they just jump and they land.
They land wherever.
Wherever.
Yeah.
They land wherever. And if your dad was out doing those things, it could very well have attached himself to him and brought him home.
Yeah.
Because they don't die, they don't disappear, they go somewhere.
Right.
So,
I remember them saying that, whenever they would cast anything out, they would send it to the Gobi Desert. And I remember people being like, well, if you had any kind of power, why wouldn't you send it straight to hell? But that's why.
Yeah, exactly right.
That's why. Yeah.
Bound hand and foot, sent to a dry, arid place. Because in the scriptures, Jesus witnesses to that. When a demon is cast out, it wanders in a dry, arid place for a time, and then it comes back. And if it doesn't find anything, the room swept clean, and of course it needs to be replaced. It needs to be replaced with spiritual activity, going to church, receiving the sacrament, devotions, prayer, those kind of things. Because if you don't replace it, and it's just, you just go on with life thinking, okay, I'm fixed, it's going to come back and bring 7 of his buddies to be 7 times worse.
Yeah. No. What other stories do you have that are pre-Bree?
Pre-Bree.
Pre-Bree stories.
Well, I've got so many, but I was in the homeless shelter. I was working at the homeless shelter, doing my undergrad for my bachelor's degree in religion, and of course I'm in my 30s at this point. And before I went to seminary to get my master's degree, and I was on the night shift, and I was the night chaplain, and my job would be to patrol the facility. And of course, the people in the community, they protected the homeless shelter because we fed them 3 meals a day.
Sure.
So they didn't want police presence for one, so they didn't want a bunch of crime going on there. Secondly, they wanted to eat, so they protected the homeless shelter. And there was a dorm called the STEP dorm, Spiritual Training and Emphasis Program, and it was a dorm where we take 30 guys at a time, and this dorm would be set aside from the regular dorm, and these guys would be in a recovery program. And if they would be breathalyzed every time they came in and out of the shelter, and they would do spiritual exercises and take spiritual commitments. And after about a month's time, if they stayed sober, they would then go to our Door of Faith facility, which was clear out south of town by the zoo, for a longer term recovery type program. So I opened, there was the spiritual training and emphasis program day room. And the day room is where they hung out during the day. Of course, you locked it at night because they couldn't be in there at night, and you couldn't trust them not to go in, or, you know, be like children, I want a drink of water or whatever. And I went upstairs, and it was about midnight, maybe 2 in the morning, and I noticed that the door was unlocked. And so I went in and turned the light on, and there was a young man in there. His name was Brian. And I had met Brian at a previous ministry, a Teen Challenge of the Midlands, and he, of course, had flunked out. And he had shared with me that he was demonically possessed. Well, I didn't even know that he showed up at the shelter. He must have showed up during the day, got into the program, and then I get there at night, and I didn't see him until then. And he looked at me with these dark black eyes, and he started to recite to me some of the sins of my youth. Some things that I did in junior high and high school that I was ashamed of. And there's no way in God's green earth this 20-something-year-old young man could know any of this stuff. And again, I was going to school to try to become a pastor. All of these instances, I look back, are clearly trying to intimidate and deter me from answering God's call. And this was one of them. So, of course, I was by myself, not trained in any of that. And so I shut the light off, shut the door, and just left him in there in the dark. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So did you ever tell other people your stories at that time?
Yes.
Yeah. How did they react to those?
They thought I was insane. They thought I was exaggerating. But Brian disappeared. He wasn't there the next morning, and he never, no one at the shelter knows what happened to him, where he went.
Really?
He just literally disappeared.
Wow. Maybe he was never really there.
I don't know.
You know?
Could be.
Yeah.
Could be, yeah.
Wow.
Could be.
Wow. Yeah, you know, I would tell people, you know, my stories, especially like, you know, my dad, and he was never surprised by anything that I told him. You know, I could have told him anything, and he was never surprised because he had seen so much and he had experienced so much. But I know one night, it was quite late at night, and when I was 16 years old, I wanted to learn how to drive stick shift so badly. I would have done anything. You know, I'd smuggle anything if you let me drive a stick shift. You know what I'm saying? Anything. And so my stepsister had Toyota Celica. And it was a nice little car, little black car, and it was a little 5-speed, and it was so fun to drive. And so she told me one night, it was about 11:30, she told me, she said, can you run down to the Exxon station and get me a Mountain Dew? And so I told her, yeah, absolutely. I drive your car, absolutely, I'll do that. Because, you know, we lived out in the middle of nowhere, but it just so happened that we were about a mile off the interstate, and there was an Exxon station there. So she gave me the keys to her car, and I set off. Now, at the end of my dad's road, it never failed. I always killed the car there. I always killed the car there, and I knew I was probably going to do it that night. But I roll up to the stop sign, and I look, and there is a man. He looks to be in his 20s. And he's got some scraggly blonde hair and a scraggly beard, and he's dressed in army fatigues. And he walks right by my window, and he looks in at me. And oh my word, I reached over and I locked the door, and then I look over and I go to lock the passenger door because I'm old, and we didn't have automatic locks back then. It wasn't pushing a button and everything locked. You had to do it manually. But anyway, and so, you know, I looked all over for him, and I never could find him. He just wasn't there. He just wasn't there. When I reached over and locked that door, and when I looked back, he was gone. He was gone. I didn't see him when I rolled up to the stop sign. I didn't see him when I came back. So I don't know where he came from or who he was or anything like that. But I tell you what, I didn't kill it at that stop sign ever again. I learned how to hold that car.
Well, I served 7 years in Charleston, West Virginia. And I know that a lot of my denominational leaders still don't have any clue about all of the things that I went through there, or the depth of the supernatural things that I had experienced there. mostly because I haven't shared them with them, because I don't know if they believe me. But I was blessing a house when I first got there. The people were moving and they wanted the house blessed, and they just felt like there was something there. And there was a horseshoe, a heavy horseshoe that they laid on top of the dryer to keep the dryer from rattling. Mm-hmm. And it was laying on top of the dryer. And as I was blessing that room in the basement, that horseshoe flew off the dryer just past my head and embedded itself into the drywall right behind me. And as we went to the little girl's room, you could see your breath.
Oh, yeah.
And the little girl was exhibiting some behaviors that were bizarre. And that's about as far as I can go with that, confidentially speaking. And then, of course, the boyfriend started to growl. And he closed his eyes and speak in a different voice. And again, I was untrained. I was unaware of what to do. I didn't know how to handle such a situation. You know, they think it's so easy. Just rebuke it in the name of Jesus. Well, when you're in the midst of things, sometimes that doesn't go right away. You have to rebuke it in the name of Jesus several times.
Yeah.
So, but that really started me thinking that I was on the road to maybe studying demonology. Yeah. And not systematic theology. Yeah. And I did a lot of house blessings. I did more so there than I ever have, and more strange occurrences.
I know when we go on a house blessing, you tell me whatever happens, don't react to it. But that's easier said than done. Right. I mean, it's way easier said than done, because, you know, when something happens, you can't help but react to it. Yeah. You can't help but, you know, be like, oh,
Yep. Don't react to it. Don't pay attention to it.
Yeah. It's really, really hard not to react and not to give it your full attention.
I was called one night to some apartment houses, and for some reason, a lady's daughter had moved back in with her, and her boyfriend had died, and for some reason, the funeral home sent half of the ashes to her, and half of the ashes to another lady. So she had these ashes of this boyfriend. And of course, the boyfriend and she had a boy, a young man who was about probably 12 years old. And they asked me to bless the house. Apparently, the young boy had been seeing the dad and having conversations with him that was in the ashes. And of course, then when Grandma, who owned the apartment, or was the name on the lease of the apartment, caught a glimpse of him, it was time to call Pastor Jamie.
Oh, I'm sure.
And so I went over directly in the middle of the night and blessed both apartments. And we buried the ashes. We made sure that they were laid to rest, that they were put somewhere where they were not accessible or able to be unrestful.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I would still contend that it was a demonic figure. It wasn't the person in the ashes.
Sure.
But the ashes, whatever was tormenting the person while he was alive, he was a drug addict. Whatever was tormenting while he was alive had attached itself to the ashes.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and that's what we were experiencing.
Yeah.
And it was trying, of course, then to lure the boy in to oppression by mimicking and trying to pretend to be the dad.
Yeah, I totally believe that they attach to places or to things. I know when my boy's dad and I, when we hadn't been married real long, but we had gone to a cabin in the mountains of North Carolina, and it was a cabin that his family had owned, had it for a number of years. And you know, North Carolina, it's warm even in the mountains. It's warm. Now, it can be a little bit chilly in the early morning or in the evening, but for the most part, you know, in the summertime, it's pretty pleasant there. But I remember walking into this cabin, and it was cold. It was cold. It was extremely cold, especially for the time of year that it was. I believe it was June or July. I mean, it was a good summer, and it was incredibly cold there. And we had a little black feist. She was a scrappy little dog. She'd fight anything. But she didn't like that cabin at all. She didn't like the cabin, and she didn't want to go into it. You had to pick her up, and you had to carry her into it, and she just didn't like being there. But anyway, she would stand and she would stare at a bedroom doorway like somebody were standing there, like she was looking at somebody, looking them up and down, and she'd just growl and growl. And anyway, we tried to start a little fire. You know, there was no central heating and air or anything like that. We had to start a little wood fire and a little wood stove, and we just were not able to knock the chill off. You know, it was a small cabin. It shouldn't have taken a whole lot to knock the chill off, especially on a summer's day. But we couldn't get the chill knocked off. And I remember my daddy saying, that if you're ever in a situation where, you know, you've got this immense coldness that you can't get rid of and you believe that you're in the presence of evil, you open up God's Word and you start reading it. And that's what I did. And, you know, slowly, the room started to warm up, but just a little bit. It never did get real warm. But the little dog would not eat. She wouldn't eat. We went that night, and I asked him, I said, can we get out of here for a little bit? Can we maybe go to the grocery store, get something for dinner, come back and cook? And that's what we did. And the dog was fine when we were outside the house. We all felt better when we were outside the house, but we went and we got steak, and we brought it back, and we grilled some steak, and the dog would not eat the steak. I've never seen a dog turn down steak, but she would not eat that steak. And we determined not long after dark that we were not going to stay in this cabin. So we ended up, we were cleaning everything up. We wanted to leave things as neat as what we had found them. And my ex-husband took the steak and he put it outside the door, and the dog ran outside the door and gobbled that steak like she was starving to death, but she would just not eat it there.
In the house.
Yeah. And I know some people would be like, oh, well, it was a cold cabin and the dog was acting weird and you're acting like it was something. But I'm telling you, the feeling that you got there, you knew that it was something. You felt like something was watching you constantly. And the way that little dog would just watch that door frame and just look up and down, and she was looking at, she saw something. So.
Yeah, we in Charleston, Arthur, our big dog, would continue to be locked in the bathroom.
Yeah, the
And
downstairs bathroom.
There's no way he could be locked in there. But he became. The girls were held down. My daughters were held down in their sleep, suffocated. There were other instances, of course, I can't talk about. But there was a demon who manifested himself to me, and he was about a 4-foot high boy, black hair, black eyes, black suit, white shirt, black tie, just the blackest eyes. And he was mocking me. He had conquered an area of my life, and he was mocking me. And so when I saw him, finally, I realized what was the source of the tribulation I was going through at the time. And so there were just, all kinds of instances. When we were interviewing in Holdridge, Nebraska to preach, we went out there as a family. We were staying in a hotel. And as we were laying in bed, and Gabby was really small at that point, and she was sleeping between us, she would look up at the ceiling, and there'd be things crawling on the ceiling and crawling on the walls. And Gabby rolled over and said, Dad, there's a demon in this room. So even at the young age, she recognized it, and what was going on.
And you probably weren't involved in these kinds of things at that point, were you?
Not at all.
You hadn't started your...
But the idea was the next morning I was going to go and try out preaching at Holdridge, and they would call me as a pastor.
Oh, my
So again,
Lord.
it was another attempt to intimidate and discourage. So once you recognize them for what they are, you just kind of brush them off. So,
my son and I my oldest son, Stephen, and I were in a secondhand store, and he saw this old map that was framed that he really wanted. And the frame didn't really go with anything, but I told him, I said, we'll get it, we'll paint that frame, and it'll be fine. And we got it, we painted the frame, and we put it in our house above our mantle. It looked really good up there. We got so many compliments on that map. But anyway, it wasn't too long after, putting that up there. You wake up in the middle of the night, and I'm not kidding you.
No, I believe you.
You would see these giant spiders. I mean, giant spiders just scurrying on the wall. I mean, to the point to where you would just jump up and you would start looking for them, and you would just be panicked. And it was unreal. But of course, I remember waking up and being so convinced that there was a giant basketball-sized spider, because I saw him.
Yeah.
And my my ex-husband, he would be looking for it. And he couldn't find it. It was unreal, the things that and just the night terrors and the visions and things like that, and ended up getting rid of that map for sure. That one ended up.
So we say all that to say this. Genuinely, we're in this to help people. That's what I got into it for. That's what you got into it for. To help people who have these experiences and have nowhere to go, as I had nowhere to go. No one to turn to, and no one that was an expert on it. And we don't charge money, and we're not in it for money. We're here to help. And so if you have experiences like that, it's heavytheology@gmail.com. Contact me. And I'm certainly willing to listen. I'm certainly ready to believe you.
Yeah. I don't think there's anything they could tell us that we wouldn't believe.
Certainly aren't going to shock me.
Yeah.
So, and that's genuinely why we're in this. Some podcasters are in it for money and self-glorification. We're not looking to be famous. We're not looking to make any money. We just want to make ourselves available. So the podcast is a way of making ourselves available, getting the word out that we're here to help, and we're here to honestly do whatever it is within our power to help you get past this, or to enrich your spiritual life, to defend yourself against such things.
Absolutely. All right, well, next week we'll talk about our creepiest encounters since we've known each other, and we'll take a look ahead into this summer's Bree Mix episodes. Sounds like a plan?
Sounds like a plan.
All right. Thank you to Trent and Jackie for allowing us to use their beautiful venue here at Crow Coffee Lounge in Yuma, Colorado. And thank you to Shane over at Hive and Pulpit for his excellent editing abilities. And we'll do it again next week.
Bye, guys.
Bye, guys.